The northern wind howled through the stone hall, carrying with it the scent of pine and old blood. Lyra Kalis stood before 50 warriors who wanted her gone, her wedding veil still damp from crossing the frozen threshold. Commander Dravenholt's voice cut through the silence. "The girl thinks she understands war." Laughter rippled across the chamber, harsh, dismissive, final. But Lyra didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, picked up the battle map, and said 5 words that would either crown her or kill her. "You're marching into a slaughter." The room went dead quiet. King Ronan Varkas leaned forward, eyes narrowing. This wasn't the obedient bride he'd expected. If you want to see how one woman rewrites the rules of an entire kingdom, stay until the end. Drop a like, tell me what city you're watching from, and let's begin. The marriage contract had been signed 3 months before Lyra ever set foot in the north. Her father, Lord Kalis of the Southern Territories, had negotiated it like a grain shipment. Weights, measures, terms, no emotions, no questions about compatibility. Just strategy wrapped in silk and sealed with wax. Lyra had read the contract twice. Once quickly, once slowly. She'd noted every clause, every implication. This wasn't a marriage. It was a business transaction. The North needed southern trade routes. The South needed northern military protection. And she was the collateral that made both sides sign. She didn't cry about it. Crying was for people who believed the world owed them fairness. The journey north took 16 days. 16 days of watching the landscape change from rolling green hills to jagged gray mountains. 16 days of her escort, 3 southern knights and a nervous clerk, trying to make conversation she didn't want. 16 days of cold that seeped through layers of wool and fur until it settled in her bones. On the 17th day, she saw the capital. It wasn't beautiful. Beauty implied softness, and there was nothing soft about the fortress city of Varkhold. It was carved into the mountainside like a scar, all sharp angles and brutal efficiency. The walls were thick enough to withstand siege engines. The gates were iron-reinforced oak that could stop a charging warhorse. And above it all, the king's tower rose like a blade pointed at the sky. "Ancestors preserve us," muttered Sir Callum, the oldest of her escorts. "I've heard stories, but stories are usually exaggerations," Lyra said, adjusting her cloak. "This appears to be accurate reporting." The gates opened with a sound like grinding teeth. Inside, the city was organized chaos. Market stalls crowded against barracks. Blacksmiths worked next to bakeries, the smell of hot metal mixing with fresh bread. Children ran through the streets, darting between soldiers and merchants with practiced ease. Everyone moved with purpose. No one dawdled. A delegation met them at the inner courtyard. 5 men in northern furs, their faces weather-beaten and suspicious. The leader was a giant of a man with a scar running from his left eyebrow to his jaw. "Lady Kalis," he said, his accent thick and northern. "I'm Commander Dravenholt. I'll escort you to your quarters. The wedding is tomorrow at dawn." "Dawn?" Sir Callum protested. "That's barely time to—" "The North doesn't wait for comfort," Holt interrupted, not even looking at him. His eyes were on Lyra, measuring. "The sooner this is done, the sooner we all get back to important work." Lyra met his gaze steadily. "I agree. Efficiency is preferable to ceremony." Something flickered in Holt's expression. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance. "You'll be shown to the royal wing. Don't wander. The fortress isn't safe for those who don't know it." "I'm not in the habit of wandering," Lyra said, "but I appreciate the warning." The quarters they gave her were spacious but stark. Stone walls, a large fireplace, fur rugs on the floor. A bed that could sleep 4. Windows that looked out over the eastern mountains. No books, no writing desk. Nothing that suggested anyone thought she might want to think. She requested both immediately. The servant who brought them, a young woman named Kira with sharp eyes and quick hands, lingered after setting down the desk. "Can I get you anything else, my lady?" "Information," Lyra said, sitting down and pulling out her own writing materials. "How long have you worked in the fortress?" 5 years, my lady." "And in that time, how many political marriages has the king contracted?" Kira blinked. "You're the first, my lady. King Ronan doesn't usually, well, he doesn't usually negotiate. He conquers." "Yes, my lady." Lyra wrote this down. "What changed?" "I wouldn't know, my lady. I'm just a servant." "Servants know everything worth knowing." Lyra looked up, and her expression was direct, without condescension. I'm not asking you to betray anyone. I'm asking you to help me understand the place I'm about to call home. Kira hesitated, then stepped closer. There's been trouble. Raiders from the eastern clans. They're getting bolder, attacking supply routes. The king needs resources he doesn't have. Your father's trade routes could stabilize the region, Lyra finished. Yes, that's the mathematics of it. She set down her pen. What about the human part? What kind of man is Ronan Varkas? Hard, Kira said immediately. Fair, mostly. Brutal when he needs to be. He's kept the North alive through 3 winters that should have killed us all. People respect him, some fear him, but she struggled for words. He's the kind of king who'd burn down a village to save a kingdom. Pragmatic. Dangerous. Often the same thing, Lyra said softly. The wedding happened at dawn, as promised. No flowers, no music, just a stone hall, 2 witnesses, and a priest who spoke the binding words in less than 5 minutes. Ronan Varkas wore armor, not ceremony clothes. He was exactly as tall as the report said, exactly as scarred, exactly as unreadable. When the priest pronounced them married, Ronan looked at her for the first time with something resembling interest. You didn't argue about the time, he said. His voice was deep, roughened by years of shouting orders across battlefields. I don't argue about things that won't change, Lyra replied. Smart. Practical. The corner of his mouth almost moved. We'll see. The wedding feast was scheduled for that evening, but before that, Lyra was summoned to the War Council. She hadn't expected this. Political brides were usually decorative, kept separate from actual governance, but the messenger was insistent. The king required her presence. Immediately. The council chamber was exactly what she'd imagined. A circular room with a massive table in the center, maps weighted down with daggers and cups. 15 men sat around it, all of them northern warriors with the kind of scars that came from surviving things that killed other men. Ronan sat at the head. Draven Holt sat at his right hand. There was one empty chair. It wasn't at the table. It was against the wall, in the shadows. Lady Kalis, Ronan said, gesturing to it. Sit, observe, say nothing. Lyra sat. She observed. For the next hour, she listened to 15 men argue about the same problem from 15 different angles. The Eastern Raiders were getting bolder. Supply routes were being cut. Villages were going hungry. Something had to be done. We ride out with full force, argued a commander named Torsten, slamming his fist on the table. Hit them hard enough, they'll scatter like rats. And leave the capital exposed, countered another. They could be baiting us. Then we split our forces, divide our strength before winter, suicide. We could fortify the supply routes. With what men? We're already stretched thin. Around and around it went. The same arguments, the same counter-arguments, the same fundamental problem. Not enough resources to be everywhere at once. Holt leaned back in his chair, watching it all with the expression of a man who'd seen this dance before. The Raiders know we're weak. They're testing us. We need to show strength. Or by spring, there won't be a north left to defend. How? Ronan's question was quiet, but it cut through the noise. Specifically, how do we show strength without exposing our flanks? Holt smiled. We execute the Korvax strategy. 3 divisions, coordinated strike, hit their camps simultaneously. They won't expect aggression this close to winter. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council. Lyra's fingers tightened on her chair. Ronan was studying the map. The timing is perfect, Holt interrupted smoothly. Their scouts reported they're dispersed, gathering supplies. We hit them now, we end this. Show me the routes. Holt leaned forward, tracing lines across the map. 1st Division here, through the northern pass. 2nd Division sweeps from the west. 3rd holds the center. They're caught in a vice. Nowhere to run. It was a good plan. Clean, efficient, logical. It was also completely wrong. Lyra stood. Every eye in the room turned to her. Sit down, Holt said, not even trying to hide his contempt. You were told to observe, not... The strategy is flawed, Lyra said clearly. The room went silent. Ronan's expression didn't change. Explain. May I approach the map? No, Holt said. Yes, Ronan said. Lyra walked to the table. She was acutely aware of 15 men staring at her like she'd grown a second head. She ignored them and focused on the map. The Korvax strategy assumes the raiders are where your scouts last saw them, she said, pointing to the marked positions. But that intelligence is 4 days old. If they're gathering supplies, as you said, they've moved. Dispersed groups don't stay static. They circle, scavenge, regroup. By the time your divisions reach these positions, you'll be attacking empty camps. Scout reports are reliable, Holt said coldly. Scout reports are snapshots, Lyra corrected. They tell you where an enemy was, not where they are. And if the raiders know you rely on scouts, which they do, because everyone in this region does, they'll use that against you. Torsten laughed. With respect, my lady, you've been in the north for 1 day. What could you possibly— I've read every military report from this region for the past 3 years, Lyra said, not raising her voice. Your southern supply routes have been hit 12 times, eastern routes 8 times, western routes 5 times. The pattern isn't random. They're not scavengers, they're tactical. They strike where you're weakest, when you're slowest to respond. And every time you've tried a multi-division coordinated strike, they've anticipated it. She traced a different line on the map. The northern pass you're planning to use? It's a bottleneck. If they know you're coming, and they will, because 3 divisions can't move silently, they'll collapse it. 1 avalanche, 1 rock slide, and your 1st division is trapped. Your 2nd division arrives here, she pointed, and finds the enemy fortified, not scattered. Your 3rd division is too far back to help. You're not catching them in a vice. You're walking into one. The silence was absolute. Holt's face had gone red. This is absurd. She's been here 1 day and we're supposed to— Is she wrong? Ronan's voice was quiet. Holt's mouth opened, closed. The plan is sound. That's not what I asked. Holt's jaw clenched. The scouts! Answer the question, Commander. Lyra could feel the tension in the room shift. This wasn't about the plan anymore. This was about power. Holt's eyes were cold. I believe our experience in this region speaks for itself. And I believe, Ronan said slowly, that experience can become assumption. He turned to Lyra. What would you do instead? Every man at the table stiffened. Lyra took a breath. This was the moment, the edge of the cliff. Don't engage them as an army, she said. Engage them as raiders. Small, fast units that mirror their tactics. Cut off their supply lines the same way they cut off yours. Force them to defend instead of attack. They're not equipped for sustained defense. They're mobile. Make mobility a weakness instead of a strength. That's defensive posturing, Torsten protested. We're not cowards. You're not stupid either, Lyra shot back. Or you shouldn't be. Courage without strategy is just elaborate suicide. Ronan was still watching her. How long would your approach take? 3 weeks to strangle their supply lines. 6 weeks to force surrender or dispersal. That's too long, Holt said immediately. Winter is exactly why it works, Lyra interrupted. They can't sustain a mobile force through winter without supplies. We can. We have fortifications. They don't. Time is on our side if we use it correctly. Ronan sat back in his chair. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, we'll table the Korvax strategy. Holt's expression went blank with shock. My lord, I said we'll table it. Ronan's tone was final. I want new intelligence, fresh scouts, and I want, he looked at Lyra, a written version of your alternative proposal, detailed, on my desk by tomorrow. Lyra nodded once. You'll have it. This council is dismissed. The men rose slowly, exchanging glances. Holt was the last to stand, his movements carefully controlled. As Lyra turned to leave, his voice followed her. Enjoy your temporary relevance, Lady Kalis. The North has a way of teaching lessons to outsiders who think they're clever. She paused at the door but didn't turn around. I don't think I'm clever, Commander. I think I'm right. There's a difference. She walked out before he could respond. That night, Lyra worked by candlelight, drafting the proposal. She included maps, logistics, supply calculations, risk assessments. She wrote until her hand cramped and the candles burned low. Kira brought her food around midnight. You should rest, my lady. Tomorrow. Tomorrow they'll be looking for flaws in this, Lyra said, not looking up. I need to make sure there aren't any. They're going to hate you for this. I know. Does that not frighten you? Lyra finally looked up. Her eyes were tired but steady. What frightens me is watching people die because of bad strategy. I can survive being hated. They can't survive being wrong. Kira set down the tray. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone softer. Someone who'd bend. Bending is for people with options, Lyra said quietly. I'm here because my father traded me like livestock. I don't have the luxury of being soft, but I do have a mind, and I'm not going to pretend I don't just to make men comfortable. She went back to writing. The next morning, she delivered the proposal herself. Ronan read it in front of her, his expression unreadable. When he finished, he set it down carefully. You realize what you've done. I've provided an alternative strategy. You've humiliated my most senior commander in front of the entire council. I've challenged a flawed plan. If his ego is more important than the lives of your people, that's a different problem. Ronan's eyes narrowed. You're either very brave or very stupid. I'm neither. I'm just unwilling to be decorative. For the first time, he smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator recognizing another predator. The North is going to eat you alive. Maybe, Lyra said. Or maybe the North has been fighting the same way for so long, it forgot there are other options. We fight the way we do because it works. It worked, she corrected. Past tense. Your enemies have adapted. You haven't. That's why they're winning. The silence stretched. Then Ronan stood, picked up her proposal, and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the latch. Council meets again in 3 days. Be ready to defend every word of this. I will be. And Lady Kalis? Yes? If you're wrong, people will die. I won't forget that. And I won't forgive it. If I'm wrong, Lyra said steadily, I won't ask you to. He left. Lyra sat alone in the chamber, listening to her heartbeat slow. She'd done it. She'd disrupted everything, changed the trajectory. Now she just had to survive the consequences. Outside, the northern wind howled against the fortress walls, and somewhere in the mountains, raiders sharpened their blades and made plans of their own. The game had changed, and Lyra Kalis had just announced she was playing. The 3 days before the council meeting felt like 3 years. Lyra spent every waking hour preparing. She cross-referenced supply manifests with terrain maps. She interviewed stable hands about horse endurance in winter conditions. She tracked weather patterns from the past decade. She talked to merchants about trade route vulnerabilities and blacksmiths about weapon production capacity. Every piece of information was a brick in the wall she was building, a wall that would either protect her or collapse on top of her. Kira became her unwitting ally, bringing not just food but gossip. And in the north, gossip was intelligence. Commander Holt's been meeting with the senior officers, Kira said on the second night, setting down a plate of bread and cheese. Every night since the council, long meetings. How long? Past midnight, sometimes later. Lyra didn't look up from her notes. Who attends? Torsten, Garrick, the brothers Vane, most of the old guard. Kira hesitated. They're saying you're a southern spy, that you're trying to weaken the north from the inside. Creative. My lady, they're serious. Torsten told his men you're poison disguised as strategy. Now Lyra looked up. Do you believe that? No, Kira said immediately. But I'm not a warrior with 20 years of battle scars who just got told I'm doing everything wrong by a woman who arrived 4 days ago. Fair point. They're going to tear you apart in that council chamber. Probably. And you're still going through with this? Lyra set down her pen. Her hand was cramping again, ink staining her fingers. Kira, if I back down now, I'm done. I'll spend the rest of my life as furniture in this fortress. A decoration. A womb for heirs. I'd rather be torn apart fighting than suffocated slowly by irrelevance. Kira studied her for a long moment. You're not like anyone I've ever met. That's not always a compliment. In this case, it might be. The morning of the council meeting, Lyra woke before dawn. She hadn't slept well, too many scenarios running through her mind, too many ways this could go wrong. But lack of sleep was just another variable to manage. She dressed carefully, not in southern silks, but in northern wool. Dark colors. Practical. She wanted to look like someone who understood the North, even if she'd only been here days. When she entered the council chamber, the temperature dropped. Every seat was filled. More than before, Holt had brought reinforcements. Officers she hadn't seen at the first meeting now sat around the table, arms crossed, expressions hostile. Ronan was already there, watching her entrance with unreadable eyes. Holt stood. "My lord, before we begin, I must formally protest this irregularity. Council meetings are for military command, not— My wife is part of this court," Ronan interrupted. "She has as much right to speak as anyone here. With respect, she has no military experience. Neither did you once." Ronan's tone was mild, but there was steel underneath. "Everyone starts somewhere, Commander. Now sit down. We're wasting daylight." Holt sat, but his jaw was tight. Ronan turned to Lyra. "You've had 3 days. Present your case." Lyra stood and moved to the map. She'd rehearsed this 100 times in her head, but the reality was different. The weight of all those hostile eyes. The knowledge that one misstep would bury her. She started anyway. "The Korvax strategy fails because it assumes a static enemy," she said, her voice steady. "But the raiders aren't static. They're nomadic by necessity and tactical by experience. They've survived in these mountains for generations by being unpredictable." She placed markers on the map. "In the past year alone, they've hit 12 different locations. No pattern in timing, no pattern in target selection. Except there is a pattern. They attack where you're weakest, when you're slowest to respond." Torsten leaned forward. "We know they're opportunistic. That's why we need to hit them with overwhelming force." "Overwhelming force requires concentration of troops," Lyra interrupted, "which means pulling defenders from other positions, which creates new weaknesses, which they'll exploit the moment you commit to your attack." "You're describing a defensive posture," Garrick rumbled. He was built like a bear, with a voice to match. "We're not cowards. I'm not suggesting cowardice. I'm suggesting you stop fighting on their terms." She traced new lines on the map. "They're mobile because they can't hold territory. They raid because they can't sustain prolonged engagement. Those aren't strengths. Those are limitations. And limitations can be exploited." She pointed to 3 key positions. "Instead of chasing them with large forces, you create a network of small, rapid response units, 20 men each, stationed here, here, and here, close enough to support each other, far enough apart to cover the most vulnerable supply routes." 20 men can't hold against a raiding party," one of the younger officers protested. "They're not supposed to hold. They're supposed to intercept and delay." Lyra moved more markers. "A raiding party hits a supply route. Your response unit engages immediately, not to win, but to slow them down. They send for reinforcement. Second unit arrives within the hour. Third unit cuts off the retreat. The raiders are caught between 3 forces instead of facing one massive army they can avoid." Holt's expression was carved from ice. "You're spreading our forces thin. One coordinated attack on multiple fronts and we're overwhelmed." "Only if they can coordinate," Lyra countered. "But coordination requires communication. Communication requires predictability. The moment they start operating in large coordinated groups, they stop being raiders and start being an army. And armies need supply lines, staging areas, command structures, all things we can find and destroy." She met Holt's eyes directly. "Your strategy treats them like an army. Mine treats them like what they actually are. Desperate survivors who've gotten good at staying alive. Make survival harder, and they'll either adapt or leave. Either way, we win." Silence. Then Torsten laughed. Not a kind laugh. "This is what we're considering? Advice from a woman who's never held a sword, never led men, never even seen a real battle." "I've read about plenty of battles," Lyra said quietly, "including the ones you've lost." The room went cold. Torsten's face darkened. "What did you say?" 3 years ago, you led a force of 200 men into the eastern valleys. You lost 63. 2 years ago, a winter campaign cost you 47. Last spring, the Northern Pass, those were tactical withdrawals. "Those were failures," Lyra said, not raising her voice. "Brave failures. Honorable failures. But failures nonetheless. And the thing about failure is, It teaches you what doesn't work. You've been fighting the same way for decades. It worked when the enemy was less organized. It doesn't work now. Continuing to do it isn't bravery, it's stubbornness. Torsten stood up so fast his chair scraped against stone. "How dare you?" "Sit down," Ronan said. "My lord, this is an insult to every man who's bled for—" "I said sit down." Torsten sat, but he looked like he wanted to put his fist through the table. Ronan's gaze swept the room. "Anyone else want to challenge her facts? Because I've read the same reports she has. The numbers don't lie." No one spoke. "Then let's talk about implementation," Ronan said. "Lady Kalis, you're proposing we reorganize our entire defensive structure. How long would that take?" 2 weeks to establish the first network, 4 weeks for full implementation. And in those 4 weeks, while we're reorganizing, we're vulnerable. "We're vulnerable now," Lyra pointed out. "At least this way, we're moving toward a solution instead of repeating the same mistakes." Holt finally spoke, his voice carefully controlled. "My lord, I understand the appeal of fresh perspectives, but this plan is untested, unproven. We'd be gambling the safety of the entire North on theory." "All plans are theory until they're executed," Lyra said. "Theory built on experience is different from theory built on books. Experience is just history. Books are analysis of history. I'm offering you analysis of your own experience, patterns you're too close to see." "Or patterns that don't exist," Holt shot back. "You're finding meaning in randomness because you need to justify your presence here." That stung because there was a grain of truth in it. Lyra did need to justify her presence, but that didn't make her wrong. "Test it," she said suddenly. Ronan's eyebrow raised. "Test it how?" "Send out one response unit. Just want one. Position them on the western supply route. That's where the next attack is most likely based on historical patterns. If I'm wrong, you lose nothing. If I'm right, you have proof of concept." Holt shook his head. "And if the raiders hit somewhere else while we're playing games with experimental tactics? Then you respond the way you always have," Lyra said. "This isn't about abandoning your experience, Commander. It's about supplementing it. You keep your main forces ready, but you let me prove that small, smart units can do what large, slow armies can't." Ronan was quiet for a long time. The whole room waited. Finally, "1 unit, 20 men. You choose the position. If it works, we discuss expansion. If it fails," he looked at Lyra, "we don't discuss anything, ever again." It was a test. A trap, maybe. But it was also an opening. "Agreed," Lyra said. Holt stood. "My lord, I strongly advise against Your objection is noted, Commander. But I'm curious." Ronan's smile was thin. "And curiosity is expensive enough that I'm willing to pay for it. Once." The meeting ended with the kind of tension that made the air feel thick. Officers filed out, some shaking their heads, others muttering to each other. Holt was the last to leave, and as he passed Lyra, he leaned in close enough that only she could hear. "You just bet your entire future on 1 unit of men who don't trust you. I hope you sleep well tonight." "I don't," Lyra said. "But I'll sleep better knowing I tried." He walked out. Ronan remained seated, studying her. "You realize what you've done. I've bought myself 1 chance. You've put yourself on a clock. If that unit fails, every person in this fortress will blame you. They'll say you got men killed. They'll say you're dangerous. And I won't be able to protect you. I'm not asking for protection. I'm asking for fairness. The North doesn't do fair, it does survival. Then I'll survive." She met his eyes. "Or I won't. But at least I'll know I tried something different." Ronan stood and walked to the window. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, the first of the season. "Why are you doing this? You could have stayed quiet, played the dutiful wife. No one would have blamed you." "I would have." "That's not an answer." Lyra joined him at the window. "When I was 12, my father took me to a battlefield. A week after the fighting ended. He wanted me to understand that war had consequences. There were bodies still in the field, too many to bury quickly. I asked him why they died. He said because their commander made a bad decision." She paused. "I asked if anyone challenged that decision. He said no, it wasn't proper. The commander had experience, seniority, authority. So everyone followed him, and everyone died. And you decided you'd never follow a bad decision. I decided I'd never stay silent when I saw one coming. Ronan turned to look at her fully. His eyes were gray like winter stone. Silence keeps you safe. Safety isn't the same as living. For a moment, something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. But it was gone as quickly as it came. Choose your 20 men carefully, he said, because if this goes wrong, those 20 men will be the last soldiers who ever listened to you. The next morning, Lyra stood in the training yard watching soldiers drill. She needed to select her unit, but she had no idea how. She didn't know these men, didn't know their skills, their loyalty, their capacity to follow orders from someone they didn't respect. A voice came from behind her. "You're looking for volunteers, I hear." She turned. A man stood there, mid-30s, wiry build, scar across his nose. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't hostile either. "Word travels fast," Lyra said. "Fortress this size? Secrets last about 10 minutes. He crossed his arms. "Name's Dax. I've been stationed on the western routes for 5 years. I've fought raiders more times than I can count. Lost friends to them." "Then why would you volunteer for an untested strategy led by someone with no military experience?" "Because I'm tired of losing friends." His expression was hard. "Commander Holt's a good man. Brave. Strong. But brave and strong doesn't win against smart and patient. Raiders are getting smarter. We're not. I figure at this point, different is better than more of the same." Lyra studied him. "You'll be criticized for this. Your fellow soldiers won't understand." "Let them talk. I stopped caring about talk around the 3rd funeral. If this fails, it'll be worse than talk. And if it succeeds, maybe next winter we lose fewer men." He shrugged. "I'll take those odds." Lyra held out her hand. "Welcome to the unit." He shook it. "Don't make me regret this. I'll try my best." Over the next 2 days, 19 more men joined. Not the best soldiers. Those were loyal to Holt. Not the strongest. Those didn't believe in the plan. But the ones who came were tired. Tired of losing. Tired of the same old strategies producing the same old casualties. They were hungry for something different, even if different meant risky. Lyra drilled them herself, though drill was generous. She couldn't teach them to fight. They knew that better than she ever would. But she could teach them to think like raiders, to move fast, strike hard, and disappear before reinforcements arrived. "You're not trying to win battles," she told them in the cold training yard, breath misting in the air. "You're trying to make raids too expensive, too risky, too unpredictable. Make them think twice before attacking a supply route because they know you'll be waiting." "And if they attack anyway?" one soldier asked. "Then you delay them long enough for reinforcements to arrive. You're not alone out there. You're the first line, not the only line." Dax raised his hand. "What if we lose communication? Winter storms can cut us off for days." "Then you use your judgment. I'm giving you a framework, not a script. If the situation changes, you adapt. That's the whole point. Flexibility beats rigidity." The men exchanged glances. This was different from what they were used to. Northern military doctrine was about discipline, hierarchy, following orders without question. Lyra was asking them to think. It made some of them uncomfortable. On the 3rd day, they deployed. 20 men positioned along the western supply route, hidden in positions Lyra had scouted herself. Not at the route itself, too obvious, but in the approaches, the likely paths raiders would use. Ronan came to see them off. So did Holt, though he looked like he was attending a funeral. "Remember," Lyra told Dax, "engagement isn't about heroics. It's about information and delay. Hit them, slow them down, call for support. Don't try to be heroes." Dax grinned. "Heroes die. I'm fond of living." "Good. Keep that attitude." The men rode out as the sun climbed over the eastern mountains. Lyra watched them go until they were specks against the snow. Holt appeared at her elbow. "You've just sent 20 men into position based on a guess." "An educated guess. Still a guess." "Commander, every military decision is a guess. You just dress yours up in experience and call it certainty." He turned to face her fully. "If they die, their blood is on your hands. I'll make sure everyone knows it." "If they die, I'll know it without your help," Lyra said quietly. "But they're not going to die. Because unlike your strategies, mine doesn't treat soldiers like expendable game pieces. You think I don't value my men? I think you value winning more than you value their lives. And eventually, that catches up to you. Holt's face went dark. You don't know anything about what I value. I know you've been undermining me since I arrived. I know you've been holding late-night meetings with officers, turning them against me. I know you're waiting for this to fail so you can get back to being the king's only advisor. Lyra stepped closer. What I don't know is why you're so threatened by someone trying to save lives. I'm not threatened. I'm protective. Of this kingdom, of the king, of a military structure that's kept us alive for generations. That structure is crumbling. You can either adapt or go down with it, but don't pretend your resistance is about protecting anything except your own pride. For a moment, she thought he might actually hit her. His hand twitched, his jaw clenched. Then he turned and walked away. Ronan, who'd been watching from a distance, approached. Making friends, I see. Wasn't trying to. Good. Because you're failing spectacularly. Despite everything, Lyra almost smiled. How long until we know if this works? Raiders usually hit at night, so 12 hours, maybe less. He paused. Can you handle the waiting? Do I have a choice? No? Then I'll handle it. But handling it and doing it well were different things. The next 12 hours were the longest of Lyra's life. She tried to work on other projects, but her mind kept drifting to the western route, to Dax and his men, waiting in the cold, to all the things that could go wrong. Kira brought dinner, but Lyra couldn't eat. You should rest, Kira said gently. Can't. You can't help them by exhausting yourself. I can't help them at all. That's the problem. Lyra stood and paced to the window. I sent 20 men into danger based on patterns I saw in reports. What if I'm wrong? What if the patterns are coincidence? What if you're right, Kira interrupted. What if this works and you save lives? And if it doesn't? Then you tried. That's more than most people do. Lyra leaned against the cold stone. Trying isn't enough. Results matter. Results take time. I don't have time. I have one chance. If this fails, a bell rang, sharp, urgent, 3 times. Lyra's heart stopped. 3 bells meant alarm. Something had happened. She ran. The courtyard was chaos, soldiers moving, orders being shouted, horses being saddled. Lyra pushed through the crowd, looking for someone who knew something. She found Ronan near the gates, armored and armed. What happened? She demanded. Your unit engaged raiders an hour ago. They're holding position, but they need reinforcement. So it worked. They found them. They found something. Whether it's working is a different question. Ronan swung onto his horse. I'm riding out with 200 men. If your strategy holds, we'll arrive in time. If it doesn't, it will. You don't know that. I know Dax won't break. I know those men understand the plan. You know theory, Ronan interrupted, not unkindly. Now we see if theory survives contact with reality. He rode out, and Lyra was left standing in the courtyard, watching the gates close behind him. The waiting started again. Worse this time, because now it wasn't hypothetical. Men were fighting, maybe dying. And all she could do was stand here and wait. Holt appeared from the shadows. Well, the moment of truth. Go away. This is what leadership feels like, Lady Kalis. Sending men into danger and waiting to see if you were smart enough to keep them alive. I said go away. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know that sick feeling in your stomach, that voice wondering if you made the right call. It never goes away. He moved closer. And if they die, you'll hear that voice for the rest of your life. Lyra turned to face him. Is that what you want? For me to break? To fail? I want you to understand that this isn't a game. This isn't an intellectual exercise. These are lives. I know they're lives. Why do you think I can't eat, can't sleep, can't think about anything else? Her voice cracked slightly. I'm terrified, Commander. Absolutely terrified that I'm wrong and men are going to die because I convinced them to trust me. But the alternative was doing nothing. And doing nothing when you see a better way, that's cowardice. So, yes, I'm afraid. But I'm still here. Still standing, still believing I made the right call. Holt studied her for a long moment. Something in his expression shifted, not approval exactly, but maybe understanding. "We'll see," he said finally. Then he walked away. 3 hours passed. Then 4. Lyra waited in the war room pacing. Kira stayed with her, silent support. Finally, just after midnight, the bells rang again. Different this time. 2 rings, then a pause, then 2 more. Return signal. The units were coming back. Lyra ran to the gates. They rode in slowly, torches lighting the darkness. Ronan was at the front, blood on his armor but upright. Behind him, Dax and most of his unit, tired, battered, but alive. Behind them, prisoners. A dozen raiders, hands bound, weapons confiscated. Lyra's breath came out in a rush. Ronan dismounted and pulled off his helmet. "Your strategy worked. Barely. But it worked." "What happened?" Dax answered, sliding off his horse with a wince. "Raiders hit the supply route just like you predicted. We engaged from 3 sides like you said. Didn't try to win, just delayed. Made them think we were a larger force. They started to retreat, got confused about our numbers, made mistakes. By the time the king arrived with reinforcements, they were scattered and disorganized. Easy pickings." "Casualties?" Lyra asked quietly. 3 wounded. None dead. Relief crashed through her so hard she had to steady herself against the gate. 3 wounded versus a dozen prisoners and a routed raiding party, Ronan said. "That's the best ratio we've had in 2 years." Around them, soldiers were gathering. Word was spreading. Lyra could hear the murmurs, surprise, disbelief, grudging respect. Holt pushed through the crowd. For a moment, he just stared at the prisoners. Then he turned to Lyra. "One success doesn't prove a strategy." "No," she agreed, "but it proves it's worth testing further." He didn't respond, but he didn't argue either. Ronan handed his reins to a stable hand. "Council meets tomorrow. We'll discuss implementation." "You mean you'll actually consider expanding this?" Lyra couldn't quite believe it. "I consider everything that keeps my people alive." He met her eyes. "You bought yourself time, Lady Kalis. Don't waste it." That night, exhausted and still shaking with relief, Lyra finally slept. But in the shadows of the fortress, Draven Holt sat alone in his quarters, staring at maps and reports. 1 success. That's all she'd earned. He could live with 1 success. But if she kept succeeding, if she kept proving herself right, then everything he'd built, his influence, his authority, his control over the king's military decisions, would crumble. He couldn't allow that. So he began to plan. Not an obvious attack. Nothing that could be traced back to him, but a careful, patient undermining, a series of small sabotages that would look like natural failures. Because Draven Holt had been protecting this kingdom for 20 years, and he wasn't about to let some southern outsider destroy everything just because she'd read a few books and gotten lucky once. He pulled out fresh parchment and began to write. If Lyra Kalis wanted to play in the North's bloody arena, she'd learn the same lesson everyone learned eventually: luck runs out. And when it did, he'd be there to make sure she fell hard enough that she never got back up. The ink was still wet on Holt's plans when the first supply cart went missing. It happened 4 days after the successful Western route defense. A routine shipment from the southern farms: grain, salted meat, winter vegetables. Expected at dawn. Never arrived. Lyra heard about it during breakfast, when a runner burst into the hall looking for Ronan. "My lord, the convoy from Millhaven? Gone. All of it." Ronan set down his cup carefully. "Gone how? Raiders?" "No signs of struggle, no bodies, just empty road." Across the table, Holt looked up from his plate. His expression was concerned, but something in his eyes made Lyra's stomach tighten. "Could be desertion," Holt suggested. "Winter's coming, men get desperate. 5 carts, 12 drivers, 6 guards, all deserting at once?" Ronan shook his head. "Send scouts. Full perimeter. I want to know what happened." The scouts found the convoy 3 hours later, abandoned in a ravine 2 miles off the main road, carts intact, food gone. No tracks leading away, except the ones leading in. "It's like they vanished," the lead scout reported, "or flew." Lyra studied the map while they debated. The ravine was north of the main route, opposite direction from known raider territory. And the timing bothered her. 4 days after her strategy succeeded, right when the council was scheduled to discuss expanding it. 2 days later, it happened again. Another convoy, different route, same result. Vanished supplies, abandoned carts. No explanation. Then a third. The fortress started to panic. Winter was coming, and food was disappearing faster than it could be replaced. Merchants refused to send shipments without triple the guards, which the North couldn't afford. Villages reported strangers asking questions about routes and schedules. And in every council meeting, Holt's voice grew louder. Lady Kalis' strategy has destabilized our defensive posture, he argued, standing before the assembled officers. We've scattered our forces into small units. Raiders know this. They're exploiting the gaps. The small units worked, Lyra countered. We proved that. You proved it once, in controlled conditions, but now we're seeing the consequences. Supply lines collapsing while our men play hide and seek in the mountains. These aren't raider attacks. Raiders take what they can carry and run. They don't make convoys disappear without a trace. Then what is it? Torsten demanded. Magic? Organization. Lyra pointed to the map. Look at the pattern. 3 convoys, 3 different routes, 3 identical outcomes. That's not opportunistic raiding. That's coordinated intelligence gathering and precise execution. You're seeing patterns again, Holt said, his tone almost gentle, almost patronizing. Looking for complexity where there's just chaos. I'm seeing coordination where you refuse to. Ronan held up a hand. Enough. Holt, pull back 2 of the small units. Reinforce the main supply routes. Lady Kalis, I want a full analysis of these disappearances on my desk by tomorrow. It was a compromise that satisfied no one. That night, Lyra worked by candlelight, spreading reports across her desk. 3 convoys. 3 vanishing acts. She traced routes, compared timing, cross-referenced weather conditions and moon phases. Kira brought tea around midnight. You should rest. Can't. There's something here. Something I'm missing. The whole fortress is talking. They're saying your strategy created vulnerabilities. My strategy didn't make convoys disappear into thin air. Lyra rubbed her eyes. This is something else. Something planned. Planned by who? That's what I need to figure out. She went back to the reports, and Kira quietly left. Hours later, as dawn approached, Lyra found it. Not in the routes or the timing, in the personnel. All 3 convoys had one thing in common. Their schedules had been logged in the fortress's central registry. A registry that only senior officers could access. A registry that had been updated the day before each disappearance with route optimization notes. Notes signed by Commander Draven Holt. Lyra's hands went cold. It couldn't be. Holt was loyal to Ronan, to the north. He'd served for 20 years. He'd bled for this kingdom. But the evidence was there, written in his own hand. She spent the rest of the morning verifying, cross-checking, looking for alternative explanations. There weren't any. The pattern was clear once you saw it. Holt updated routes, convoys disappeared, supplies ended up somewhere else. But where? And why? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dax found her in the library, looking grim. We need to talk. Privately. They walked to the ramparts where the wind made conversation private. 2 of my men went drinking last night in the lower city, Dax said, keeping his voice low. Heard something interesting. Merchant bragging about getting rich off diverted goods. Said he had connections in the fortress who made sure certain shipments never reached their destination. Did he name names? No. But he mentioned the eastern clans. Said they were paying premium prices for northern supplies. Lyra's mind raced. The eastern clans are the same ones we're supposed to be defending against. Exactly. So someone in the fortress is selling supplies to our enemies. Looks that way. Did your men get anything else? Just that the merchant expects another shipment in 3 days. Big one. Enough to feed a small army through winter. Lyra gripped the stone parapet. I need to tell Ronan. With what proof? A drunk merchant's bragging? Holt will spin that 6 different ways. I have the registry notes, which prove he updated routes. That's his job. Dax shook his head. You need more. You need to catch him in the act. How? There's another convoy scheduled in 3 days, southern route. If the pattern holds, it'll disappear like the others. He met her eyes. Unless we follow it, see where it really goes. That's dangerous. Everything worth doing is. Lyra thought fast. If we're wrong, we're wasting resources following a legitimate convoy. And if we're right, we expose a traitor and maybe save the North from starving. Dax grinned without humor. I'll take those odds. Ronan will never approve this. So don't ask him. Ask for forgiveness later instead of permission now. It was reckless, potentially disastrous. If she was wrong, it would destroy what little credibility she'd built. But if she was right, I'll need volunteers, Lyra said. People willing to track a convoy off-book. Already got them. Same unit from the western route. We trust you. He paused. Question is, do you trust yourself? Did she? She'd been in the North less than a month. She was betting everything on patterns and intuition and a drunk merchant's words. But the evidence was there. The notes, the timing, the coordination. I trust the math, Lyra said finally. And the math says something is very wrong. Good enough for me. They spent the next 2 days preparing in secret. Lyra forged documents authorizing a training exercise in the Southern Territories. Dax gathered supplies and mapped routes. They told no one, not Ronan, not the Council, not even Kira. The fewer people who knew, the fewer who could interfere. The convoy left at dawn on the third day. 20 carts, 40 guards, enough supplies to feed 3 villages through winter. Standard procedure, standard route. Lyra and Dax's unit followed from a distance, staying off the main road, using the forest for cover. For the first 6 hours, nothing unusual happened. The convoy moved steadily south, guards alert but relaxed. Normal military transport. Then, around midday, the convoy turned east. That's off-route, Dax muttered. They should be heading straight south for another 10 miles. Lyra checked her map. There's nothing east except abandoned mining camps. Been empty for years. They followed the convoy deeper into the eastern valleys. The terrain got rougher, the roads less maintained. This wasn't a supply route. This was a detour. Finally, around dusk, the convoy stopped at an old mining outpost. Buildings half collapsed, equipment rusted and broken. Should have been deserted. It wasn't. Dozens of men waited there, not northern soldiers. Their armor was different, their weapons crude but effective. Eastern clan fighters. From their hidden position in the tree line, Lyra watched as the convoy guards began unloading supplies. Not forced, willingly, efficiently, like they'd done this before. I'll be damned, Dax breathed. You were right. A figure emerged from the largest building. Even at this distance, Lyra recognized him. Commander Draven Holt. He moved through the camp like he owned it, directing the unloading, conferring with the clan leaders. At one point, he laughed at something someone said, relaxed, comfortable, completely at ease. This wasn't a kidnapping. This wasn't coercion. This was partnership. We need to get back, Lyra whispered. We need to tell Ronan. Wait, Dax pointed. Look. More figures were emerging from the buildings, not clan fighters, northern soldiers, at least 50 of them, wearing fortress insignia. Those are Holt's men, one of Lyra's unit whispered. I recognize Sergeant Vane. Lyra's mind reeled. This wasn't just supply theft. This was a coordinated operation involving fortress personnel. Holt hadn't just diverted a few convoys. He'd built an entire shadow army. How long has this been going on? She wondered aloud. Long enough to stockpile this much, Dax said grimly. Look at those storage buildings. They're full. He was right. Through the camp, Lyra could see warehouses stacked with supplies, food, weapons, armor, enough to sustain a military force for months. He's planning something, Lyra said. Something big. An uprising? Maybe. Or... She stopped as another figure appeared. This one was different. Tall, wearing furs and ceremonial armor, clan markings, a leader. Holt bowed to him. Actually bowed. The clan leader spoke. Lyra couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. He was giving orders, and Holt was taking them. We need to go, Lyra said urgently. Now, before they... A twig snapped behind them. Lyra spun to find 3 clan fighters standing there, weapons drawn. Run! Dax shouted. They scattered into the forest. Shouts erupted from the camp, torches lit. Pursuit began. Lyra ran harder than she'd ever run in her life. Branches whipped her face. Roots tried to trip her. Behind her, she could hear men crashing through the undergrowth, Getting closer. An arrow hissed past her head. Dax grabbed her arm, pulling her behind a fallen tree. This way. More arrows. One of their men screamed. They kept running, trying to circle back to where they'd left the horses. But the forest was dark, the terrain unfamiliar, and their pursuers knew the area better. Another man went down. Then another. Split up, Dax ordered. Meet at the northern cache point. The unit scattered. Lyra found herself alone, running through darkness, her breath burning in her chest. She could hear someone behind her, close, gaining. She burst into a clearing and stopped. Dead end. Cliff face ahead, river below, too far to jump. Footsteps behind her. She turned. Holt stepped into the clearing, sword drawn. Behind him, half a dozen fighters. Lady Kalis, he said almost sadly, you couldn't leave well enough alone. Lyra backed toward the cliff edge. You're a traitor. I'm a realist. The North is dying. Has been for years. Ronan's too proud to see it, but I'm not. He moved closer. The Eastern clans offered a solution, an alliance, resources, territory, survival. In exchange for what? The fortress? The kingdom? In exchange for transition, peaceful integration, better than the alternative, slow starvation while Ronan clings to old glory. He trusts you. He trusts a fantasy. I'm giving him reality. Holt's expression hardened. You could have been part of this. Could have helped manage the transition. Instead, you had to play detective. You're going to kill me. I don't want to, but you've seen too much. He raised his sword. For what it's worth, I respected what you tried to do. The small units, the strategic thinking. In another world, we might have worked well together. In another world, you wouldn't be a traitor selling out your own people. Holt moved fast, faster than Lyra expected. His sword came down. She dodged sideways, but her foot slipped on the cliff edge. She fell backward, arms windmilling. For one horrible moment, she thought she'd fall into the river. Then hands grabbed her, Holt's fighters, hauling her back from the edge. Bind her, Holt ordered. She's more useful alive, for now. They tied her wrists with rough rope. One of them searched her, finding the notes she'd made, the maps she'd marked. Holt read them by torchlight. Thorough. I underestimated you. He looked up. How many others know? Lyra said nothing. The unit you brought, they won't make it back. My men know these forests, and even if one or two escape, who'll believe them? A handful of soldiers claiming the king's most trusted commander is a traitor? Without evidence. I have evidence, the registry notes, which show I was doing my job, optimizing routes. Nothing more. He smiled. You needed proof of the meeting, the exchange, the conspiracy. And now you have it. But you're not going to share it. Ronan will figure it out. Ronan sees what he wants to see. He trusts me, has for 20 years. That trust will keep him blind until it's too late. Holt gestured to his men. Take her to the secondary camp. Keep her comfortable. We may need her later. They dragged Lyra back through the forest. She tried to memorize the route, count the turns, but in the darkness everything blurred together. They reached another camp, smaller, more hidden. A single building, heavily guarded. Inside, they threw her into a storage room and locked the door. Lyra sat in the darkness, hands bound, mind racing. Dax and the others were out there somewhere, maybe dead, maybe captured, maybe running for their lives. Ronan didn't know, the fortress didn't know, and by the time they figured it out, Holt's plan, whatever it was, would be too far along to stop. She tested the ropes, tight, professional. She wasn't getting out of these without help. The door opened. A figure stepped in carrying a lamp. Not Holt. Someone younger, uncertain. Who are you? Lyra asked. Nobody. Just, they told me to bring you water. The young man set down a cup, his hands shaking slightly. I didn't know about any of this. The conspiracy. I thought we were just doing supply runs. Your fortress personnel? Was. Holt recruited me 6 months ago, said it was special assignment. Good pay. I needed the money for my family. He looked at her desperately. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was treason. Lyra saw her opening. Then help me. Let me go. Help me get word to the king. I can't. They'll kill me. They're going to kill a lot of people if we don't stop this. You don't understand. Holt's not alone. He's got officers, soldiers, merchants. Half the fortress is with him, or at least they will be when the time comes. What time? What's he planning? The young man hesitated. There's an attack coming. 2 weeks, maybe less. The eastern clans are massing, thousands of them. They're going to hit the fortress from 3 sides while Holt opens the gates from inside. Lyra's blood went cold. That's not alliance, that's conquest. I know, but by the time anyone realizes, it'll be over. Holt's promised his people positions in the new order, safety, prosperity. He looked at her with haunted eyes. Most of them believe him. They think he's saving the North. He's destroying it. I know. The young man moved to the door. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. I can't risk my family. Wait, what's your name? He paused. Finn. Finn, listen to me. If you do nothing, your family dies anyway. When the clans take the fortress, do you really think they'll honor Holt's promises? They'll take what they want and burn the rest, including the families of traitors. Holt said, Holt is lying. To you, to himself, to everyone. The only way your family survives is if we stop this. Finn's hand trembled on the door latch. I can't. I'm sorry. He left. Lyra sat in the darkness, trying not to panic. 2 weeks. Maybe less. Thousands of clan fighters. Gates opening from inside. The North would fall. Ronan would die. Everyone who trusted her, believed in her, followed her strategy, dead. Unless she got out. Unless she warned them. She pulled at the ropes until her wrists bled. Useless. They held. Hours passed, maybe days. She lost track in the windowless room. Then the door opened again. This time it was Dax. He looked terrible, bloody, bruised, barely standing, but alive. Thought I'd lost you, he said, limping in and pulling a knife from his boot. He cut her ropes. How did you? Got away. Doubled back. Been watching the camp, waiting for an opening. He helped her stand. Most of the unit's dead. 3 of us made it out. We need to go, now. They slipped through the dark camp, past guards who were changing shifts, past buildings full of stolen supplies. Dax moved like a ghost, and Lyra followed his lead. They were almost to the tree line when someone shouted, Run! Dax pushed her forward. They ran. Behind them, the camp erupted. Bells, shouts, pursuit. They crashed through the forest, lungs burning. Dax knew the terrain better now, led them through narrow paths and across streams that would hide their tracks. An arrow struck a tree next to Lyra's head. Don't stop, Dax shouted. They didn't. They ran until dawn, until they couldn't hear pursuit anymore, until they reached a rocky outcrop where 2 other survivors waited with horses. Mount up, Dax ordered. We ride for the fortress. We ride hard, and we pray we get there before Holt realizes where we're going. Lyra pulled herself onto a horse, every muscle screaming. He already knows. He'll send riders, then we ride faster. They rode. For 2 days, they barely stopped, switching horses at hidden caches, sleeping in shifts, pushing the animals to their limits. Behind them, somewhere, Holt's men were coming. Ahead, the fortress rose against the mountains. They reached the gates at dusk on the 2nd day, half dead from exhaustion. The guards raised their weapons. Halt! Identify! Dax, fortress garrison, he shouted. I need to see the king, now! Commander Holt sent word you deserted. Holt's a traitor, you idiot. Let us through. The gates stayed closed. Then a voice from above. Open the gates. Ronan stood on the rampart, looking down at them. The gates opened. They rode through. Ronan met them in the courtyard, Holt at his side. Lyra's eyes locked with Holt's. He looked calm, almost amused. My lord, Lyra said, sliding off her horse. Commander Holt is conspiring with the eastern clans. He's been diverting supplies, building a shadow army, preparing to open the gates for an invasion. I have proof. She's delusional, Holt interrupted smoothly. 2 days ago, she took an unauthorized unit into hostile territory. Most of them died. Now she's trying to blame someone else for her failure. That's a lie, Dax stepped forward. We followed a convoy to an abandoned mining camp. We saw Holt meeting with clan leaders, saw fortress supplies being handed over, saw northern soldiers taking orders from him. You saw what you wanted to see, Holt said, shadows and confusion in enemy territory. Ronan looked between them. Lady Kalis, you're saying my most trusted advisor for 20 years is a traitor? Yes. Based on what evidence? The registry notes, the pattern of disappearances, the meeting we witnessed, notes that show me doing my job, disappearances that could be raider activity, and a meeting you claim happened but have no proof of. Holt's voice was reasonable, calm. My lord, I understand she wants to deflect from her catastrophic judgment, but accusing me of treason, I'm not deflecting. Lyra's voice cracked with exhaustion and desperation. There's an attack coming. 2 weeks or less. Thousands of clan fighters. Holt's going to open the gates from inside. That's madness, someone in the crowd muttered. Is it? Lyra turned to the assembled soldiers. How else do you explain the convoys, the missing supplies, the fact that our enemies are better fed than we are? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Holt's expression hardened slightly. My lord, this is exactly the kind of divisive paranoia I warned you about. She's trying to turn your people against each other. Ronan held up a hand for silence. He looked at Lyra for a long moment. Do you have physical evidence? Documents? Witnesses beyond your own men? Lyra's heart sank. No. But then I can't act on this. My lord, I can't arrest my senior commander based on suspicion and the word of a woman who's been here less than a month. Ronan's voice was firm but not unkind. You've proven yourself capable, Lady Kalis, but this is too far. If you don't believe me, send scouts to the mining camp. You'll see. I'll send scouts, Ronan agreed, but until they report back, this matter is closed. Commander Holt remains in his position. You will confine yourself to your quarters. Ronan, please. That's an order. Guard stepped forward, not hostile but firm. Lyra looked at Holt. He met her gaze with calm victory. He'd won. He'd positioned it perfectly, her word against his, her brief time in the north against his decades of service. As the guards escorted her away, she heard Holt's voice behind her. My lord, perhaps we should increase security. If the lady is right about an attack, and I'm not saying she is, we should be prepared. Do it, Ronan said. Lyra wanted to scream. Holt was going to use her warning to position his own forces, to prepare for the invasion he was enabling. She'd handed him the perfect cover. In her quarters, locked and guarded, Lyra stood at the window and watched the sun set over the mountains. Somewhere out there, an army was gathering. Inside the fortress, a traitor was preparing to open the gates, and she was trapped, powerless, while everything she'd tried to prevent came crashing down. The north was going to fall, and no one would believe her until it was too late. Kira came in the night, slipping past the guards with a tray of food and a folded piece of paper hidden under the bread. Lyra took the tray without speaking, waiting until Kira set it down and turned to leave. Then she saw the girl's hand brush the edge of the plate, a deliberate gesture. The guards at the door weren't watching closely. They were bored, convinced she was just another prisoner waiting out her sentence. Lyra unfolded the paper once Kira was gone. The handwriting was rough, unpracticed. Finn wants to talk. Midnight. Servants' corridor behind the kitchens. Come alone. She read it twice, then fed it to the candle flame. It could be a trap. Holt could have turned Finn, used him to bait her into something worse. But sitting here while the fortress prepared to fall wasn't an option either. At midnight, Lyra pressed her ear to the door. The guards were talking quietly, something about dice and debts. She waited until their conversation grew more animated, then slipped a blanket under her door, creating a draft that made the candle flicker. One guard cursed. Check that window. Wind's getting in. The moment they turned, Lyra picked the lock with a hairpin she'd been working loose all evening. The mechanism was simple. Northern efficiency meant no elaborate security for interior doors. 3 seconds, and it clicked. She moved fast and quiet, keeping to the shadows, taking the servant stairs down. The corridor behind the kitchen smelled like old grease and ash. Finn waited there, looking more terrified than before. You came, he whispered. You asked. What do you want? To help? Maybe. I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair. I can't sleep. Keep thinking about what you said, about my family. Have you decided I'm right? I've decided I don't want to gamble on Holt being honest. He pulled out a small leather journal. This is his, personal notes. I stole it from his quarters. I don't know if it helps, but Lyra took it, flipping through pages. Dates, meeting times, names. Nothing explicitly incriminating, but the pattern was clear. Contacts with Eastern clan leaders going back months, maybe years. This is good, she said, but it's not enough. A journal could be forged. We need something undeniable. Like what? Like catching him in the act. Lyra thought fast. You said the attack is coming in 2 weeks or less. That means final preparations, supply transfers, coordination meetings. Holt has to communicate with the clans somehow. He sends riders every 3 days. They leave at dawn from the east gate. Can you get me the schedule? Finn hesitated. If I do this, if I help you, there's no going back. Holt will know. He'll kill me. If you don't, the clans will kill everyone, including you. Lyra met his eyes. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But fear isn't a good enough reason to let people die. He nodded slowly. Tomorrow. Dawn. East Gate. A rider named Carrick. He's one of Holt's trusted men. He'll be carrying sealed orders. Can you intercept them? No, but I can delay him. Make him late. Give you time to... Finn stopped. What are you planning? Something stupid, probably. Lyra closed the journal. Go back to your post. Act normal. And Finn, thank you. Don't thank me yet. We might both die for this. Better than dying for nothing. She slipped back to her quarters before the guards noticed she was gone. Once inside, she read Holt's journal cover to cover, memorizing every name, every date, every cryptic reference. Then she started planning. Dawn came cold and sharp. Lyra watched from her window as soldiers moved through the courtyard. She spotted Carrick easily, a lean man with a messenger's satchel, heading for the stables. She also spotted Finn, intercepting him with what looked like an urgent message. Carrick changed direction, heading toward the command building. Lyra had maybe 10 minutes. She picked the lock again, slipped past the guards who were changing shifts, and made her way to the stables. The morning chaos, soldiers drilling, servants hauling supplies, merchants arguing about prices, provided cover. Carrick's horse was already saddled. The satchel hung from the pommel. Lyra approached like she belonged there, checking saddles and tack like any stable hand might. When no one was looking, she opened the satchel. Inside, 3 sealed letters. She couldn't open them without breaking the wax, which would alert Carrick immediately. But she could read the addresses. One was headed to the Wolf of Corvon, a known clan warlord. The second to the Iron Council, Eastern clan leadership. The third had no address, just a symbol she recognized from Holt's journal, a meeting marker. She closed the satchel and stepped back just as Carrick emerged from the command building, looking annoyed. Stupid waste of time, he muttered, swinging onto his horse. Finn and his paranoid messages. He rode out. Lyra watched him go, mind racing. She had names now, destinations, proof that Holt was actively communicating with the enemy. But it still wasn't enough. Ronan would say she'd seen a messenger doing his job. She needed to prove what was in those letters, which meant she needed to follow Carrick. She ran back to her quarters, grabbed her cloak and the small knife Dax had given her, and headed for the stables. I need a horse, she told the stable master. He laughed. You're confined to quarters, my lady. King's orders. The king's about to be betrayed, and I'm the only one who can stop it. She pulled out Holt's journal. This is Commander Holt's personal journal. It proves he's working with the Eastern clans. I need to follow his messenger to get the final proof. The stable master stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're saying the commander... I'm saying give me a horse, or we all die in 2 weeks, when the gates open from inside. He didn't move. Lyra played her last card. Your son serves in the garrison, doesn't he? Kira mentioned him. Young man, good with a blade. If I'm right, he's dead in 2 weeks. If I'm wrong, you can report me to Ronan yourself. The stable master's face went gray. He looked at the journal, then at Lyra, then at the stable entrance where Carrick had just disappeared. Take Nightwind, he said finally. Fastest horse we've got. But if you're lying, I'm not. She rode out before anyone could stop her, following Carrick's dust trail east. The terrain was brutal, rocky paths, steep climbs, forest so thick the sun barely penetrated. Carrick rode fast, clearly on a schedule. Lyra stayed far enough back to avoid detection, but close enough not to lose him. Hours passed. Her thighs ached from riding. Her hands were numb from cold. Finally, around midday, Carrick stopped at an old way station, half-ruined building, mostly collapsed roof. Looked abandoned. It wasn't. 3 men emerged from inside, Eastern clan fighters by their armor. Carrick dismounted and handed over 2 of the letters. They gave him something in return, another sealed message, probably. Lyra watched from cover, trying to get close enough to hear. The wind carried fragments of conversation. Final count confirmed. Gates will open on signal. Commander guarantees no resistance. Her heart hammered. This was it. Proof. Actual, undeniable proof. She needed one of those letters. Carrick and the clan fighters went inside the way station. Lyra circled around, looking for another entrance. Found a gap in the collapsed wall. She could hear them clearly now. "The wolf sends his compliments," one clan fighter was saying. "He wants confirmation about the southern battalions." "Holtz positioned them perfectly," Carrick replied. "They'll be 3 days' march away when we strike. By the time they return, it'll be over." "And the king?" "Will die in the chaos, natural casualty of war." Lyra's hands clenched. She needed to get one of those letters, needed physical evidence. A hand clamped over her mouth from behind. She tried to scream, but the grip was iron. Someone dragged her backward into the forest. She bit down hard. Her attacker grunted, but didn't let go. Then a familiar voice. "Stop fighting, you idiot. It's me." Dax. He released her and she spun around. He looked rough, bandaged, exhausted, but alive. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "Following you. Saw you leave the fortress. Figured you were doing something reckless." He glanced at the way station. "Was I wrong?" "I need one of those letters. Proof that Holt's coordinating with the clans." "Great. How do you plan to get it?" "I was working on that when you grabbed me." "Well, work faster. They're about to leave." Lyra thought fast. "Distraction. You circle around, make noise like you're a patrol. They'll investigate. I'll grab a letter while they're distracted." "That's a terrible plan." "You have a better one?" He didn't. Dax moved through the forest, positioning himself on the far side of the way station. Then he kicked over a pile of branches and shouted, "Over here! I've got movement!" The clan fighters burst out, weapons drawn. Carrick followed, hand on his sword. Lyra slipped through the gap in the wall. Inside, the letters sat on a makeshift table. She grabbed the one addressed to the Wolf of Corvan. It was already open, resealed hastily. She could crack the wax without it being obvious. Voices outside, getting closer. "Nothing here. Just an animal." She pocketed the letter and ran. Behind the way station, she found Dax already mounted. "Move!" They rode hard, taking a different route back to avoid Carrick. The forest blurred around them. Branches whipped Lyra's face. Her horse stumbled once on loose rocks, nearly throwing her. But they made it back to the fortress by dusk. The gates were closing when they arrived. Guards raised their weapons. "Lady Kalis, you're under—" "Get the king," Lyra interrupted, sliding off her horse and pulling out the letter. "Now, I have proof." The guard hesitated. "Now," Dax roared, "or I swear I'll drag you to him myself." Ronan arrived in the courtyard 5 minutes later, Holt at his side. The commander's expression was carefully neutral, but Lyra saw the tension in his shoulders. He knew, or suspected. "My lord," Lyra said, holding out the letter. This was carried by Carrick, one of Commander Holt's messengers. He delivered it to Eastern clan fighters at an abandoned way station. "I witnessed the exchange." Holt's voice was calm. "More wild accusations, my lord. She's been confined to quarters and apparently spent the day chasing shadows." "Then you won't mind if the king reads the letter," Lyra said. "Of course not. Though I'm sure it's just routine." Ronan took the letter and broke the seal. His expression didn't change as he read, but his jaw tightened. "This is signed by the Wolf of Corvan," he said quietly. "It details attack positions, timing, and—" He looked at Holt. "It refers to you by name. Promises you governorship of the Northern Territories once the clans take control." The courtyard went silent. Holt's face was stone. "That's a forgery, obviously. She had time to—" It's sealed with the wolf's personal mark, Ronan interrupted. I've seen it before in treaties. This is genuine. Then someone is impersonating me to, your messenger delivered it. Ronan's voice was ice. Your man, your route, your schedule. My lord, I can explain how... Can you? Ronan stepped forward. Can you explain why your messenger is meeting with clan warlords? Can you explain why this letter promises them the fortress? Can you explain the timing of the convoy disappearances, the positioned battalions, It's strategic. Holt's composure cracked. The North is dying. You're too blind to see it. The clans offered an alliance, a way to survive without... An alliance where they rule and we kneel? A survival strategy, Holt's voice rose. Better to live under clan leadership than die clinging to pride. You call that living? Ronan's hand went to his sword. You'd sell your own people for a promise of power? I'd save them from your stubbornness. Holt drew his own blade. 20 years I've served you. 20 years I've watched you make the same mistakes, refuse the same solutions, condemn good men to death because you won't adapt. Around them, soldiers were backing away, hands on weapons, uncertain who to support. How many are with you? Ronan demanded. How many have you turned? Holt smiled without humor. Enough. More than you think. They're tired too. Tired of your rigid honor, your inflexible pride. When the gates open, half your garrison will stand aside and let it happen. Then they'll die alongside you. You can't kill us all. Watch me. Ronan moved. Holt was ready. Blades clashed. Sharp, brutal. No grace to it. Just two men who'd fought together for decades trying to kill each other. Stop them, someone shouted, but no one moved. This wasn't a fight anyone wanted to interrupt. Lyra watched, frozen. She'd started this, exposed the conspiracy, but now it was spiraling beyond her control. Holt was good. 20 years of combat showed in every movement. But Ronan was better. Younger, faster, angrier. Within 30 seconds, Holt was on his back, Ronan's sword at his throat. Yield, Ronan growled. To what? A slow death in your cells? Holt laughed bitterly. Kill me. Make me a martyr. See how that helps your garrison loyalty. I'll take that risk. Will you? Holt's eyes were wild. The attack is still coming. In days. Maybe hours. My people are still positioned. My allies are still out there. Kill me, and you lose any chance of stopping it peacefully. Ronan's blade didn't move. There is no peaceful resolution to treason. There is if you're smart. Holt's breathing was labored. Let me contact the clans. Tell them the plan is compromised. They'll withdraw. No battle, no siege. Everyone survives. And you? Exile. Strip me of rank and let me leave. Small price for avoiding a war. It was a trap. Lyra could see it. Holt would contact the clans and accelerate the attack instead. But from the murmurs in the crowd, some soldiers were considering it. My lord, Lyra stepped forward. Don't trust him. He'll use any communication to warn them, to change the timeline, to... I know, Ronan said quietly. He looked down at Holt. How many? Exactly how many of my men have you corrupted? Enough to matter. Give me names. So you can arrest them all? Create chaos in your ranks right before an attack? Holt shook his head. I'm your only chance to end this quietly. The blade pressed harder. Names. Now. For a moment, Lyra thought Holt would refuse. Then something in his expression shifted. Calculation, maybe, or survival instinct. Sergeant Vane. Lieutenant Corps. 43 others from the southern and eastern garrisons. Most of the Supply Corps' leadership. 3 of your scout captains. The numbers made people gasp. Nearly 50 soldiers. In a fortress this size, that was catastrophic. Arrest them all, Ronan ordered. Now. Guards moved to obey, but Holt laughed. You think they'll just surrender? You think they won't resist? You're about to create a civil war inside your own walls. He was right. Lyra could see it on Ronan's face. The impossible mathematics of loyalty versus security. My lord, she said quietly, there's another option. Which is? Use them. We know who the traitors are now. We can feed them false information. Make the clans think the fortress is more vulnerable than it is. Set a trap. Holt's eyes narrowed. You're thinking tactically now. I'm almost proud. Shut up. Ronan didn't take his gaze off Lyra. Explain. Holt was planning to open the gates on a signal. We let him think that's still happening, but we control the timing. We prepare our real forces while his people believe they're still in position to betray us. When the clans attack, we have everyone exactly where we want them. And the traitors? Contained, disarmed, arrested the moment the gates close. She met Ronan's eyes. It's risky, but it's better than fighting ourselves before the real enemy arrives. Dax stepped forward. She's right. A divided fortress falls easy. Better to keep the division secret until we can handle it. Murmurs of agreement from some soldiers, disagreement from others. Ronan was silent for a long moment. Then, Commander Torsten. The big man pushed through the crowd. My lord, you're acting commander of the garrison. Choose men you trust absolutely. I want quiet surveillance on every name Holt just gave us. No arrests. No confrontations. Just eyes. And Holt? Cells, deep ones. Under guard, I trust. Guards dragged Holt to his feet. As they pulled him away, he looked at Lyra. Clever girl, he said. But you're still learning. The thing about traps? Sometimes you're the bait. Then he was gone. Ronan turned to the assembled soldiers. His voice carried across the courtyard. Commander Holt is accused of treason. The evidence is substantial. Until I determine the full scope of this conspiracy, we operate under martial law. No one leaves the fortress without direct authorization. No unauthorized communications. If you're approached about anything that sounds like conspiracy, you report it immediately. He paused. We may be compromised, but we're not broken. The North has survived worse. We'll survive this. It was a good speech, strong, confident, but Lyra could see the worry in his eyes when he looked at her afterward. They retreated to the war room, Ronan, Lyra, Dax, and Torsten. The map was still spread across the table, markers showing defensive positions that now felt obsolete. How long do we have? Ronan asked. Carrick was supposed to return with confirmation, Lyra said. When he doesn't, the clans will know something's wrong. They'll either accelerate the attack or abort. They won't abort, Torsten said grimly. Not with this much planning invested. They'll accelerate. How fast can we prepare? Ronan studied the map. Real preparations? 2, maybe 3 days if we work around the clock. Torsten pointed to weak points. We need to reinforce the eastern wall, recall the southern battalions, secure the supply depots against sabotage. And do it all while pretending nothing's changed, Lyra added. If Holt's people realize we know, they'll panic. Panic leads to mistakes. Mistakes lead to unnecessary death. Ronan looked at her with something like respect. You've thought this through. I've had time, most of it in a cell. About that, I'm sorry. I should have believed you sooner. You believed what made sense. Holt's had 20 years to build credibility. I've had weeks. She met his eyes. But we're past that now. The question is, can we win this? Honestly, I don't know. Ronan sat heavily in his chair. We're facing an army with traitors inside our walls. Even if we contain the conspiracy, we're still outnumbered. Not if we use the terrain, Dax suggested. Channel them into kill zones, make them fight uphill. Use their numbers against them. That assumes they attack where we expect, Torsten said. Lyra studied the map, something clicking in her mind. We make them attack where we expect. We control the battlefield. How? Holt's people are still watching, still reporting back somehow. We feed them information about our weakest point. Make it look like we're vulnerable on the eastern approach. They'll tell the clans. The clans will concentrate their forces there. And we'll be waiting. Exactly. Ronan looked at the eastern approaches on the map. It's a narrow pass. We could hold it with a fraction of our forces if we position correctly. Meanwhile, the real defenses are here, here, and here. Lyra marked positions. Layered fallbacks. If they break through the pass, which they won't, they hit prepared positions all the way to the fortress. It's risky, Torsten said. If they figure out the deception, they won't. Holt's people believe they're winning. They'll report what they see, and what they'll see is us preparing for the wrong battle. Ronan stood, pacing. We'd need perfect coordination, perfect secrecy. One mistake and the whole plan collapses. So we don't make mistakes, Lyra said simply. He stopped pacing and looked at her, really looked at her. You know what you're asking? You're asking me to gamble the entire North on a strategy built by someone who's never commanded a battle. I'm asking you to trust math and psychology over tradition. She held his gaze. Holt was right about one thing. You've been fighting the same way for decades. Maybe it's time to try something different. The room was silent. Then Ronan smiled. Not his predator smile. Something warmer, more genuine. Dax, gather your best men. I want them training for close-quarter defensive fighting. Torsten, quietly redistribute our forces. Make it look like rotation, not preparation. He turned to Lyra. You're now my strategic advisor. Official capacity. You'll have access to everything, maps, reports, personnel files. Whatever you need. The men won't like it, Torsten warned. The men will do their jobs. Ronan's tone was final, and maybe, just maybe, we'll survive long enough to debate about it later. Over the next 3 days, the fortress transformed. Lyra worked 20-hour days, coordinating movements, designing fallback positions, calculating supply needs. She barely slept, living on bread and cold tea. Kira brought updates from the Fortress Gossip Network. They're calling you the Southern Witch. Say you've bewitched the king. Better than Southern Spy, I suppose. Some are saying you saved us, others that you created the crisis in the first place. Both can be true. Lyra rubbed her eyes. What about Holt's people? Still playing their roles. If they know we're onto them, they're hiding it well. Good. Keep listening. On the 4th day, scouts reported movement. Massive clan forces converging on the eastern approaches. Thousands of fighters, siege equipment, supply trains. The attack was imminent. Ronan called a final council of war. Every officer, every captain, every soldier who needed to know the real plan. The enemy thinks we're weak on the eastern approach, he told them. We're going to prove them catastrophically wrong. He outlined the strategy. Lyra's strategy. The narrow pass, the kill zones, the layered defenses. Some officers looked skeptical. Others looked impressed. Questions? Ronan asked. Torsten raised his hand. What about Holt's people? When do we move on them? When the gates close. Not before. We need them to feel secure until the last possible moment. And if they try to sabotage us before then? They won't. They think they're winning. Ronan looked around the room. Any man who fights well today will be pardoned for past mistakes. Any man who betrays us dies. Those are the only 2 options. The council dispersed. Men moved to their positions. The fortress settled into tense waiting. Lyra stood on the ramparts as the sun set, watching the eastern horizon. Somewhere out there, an army was preparing to destroy everything she'd fought to protect. Ronan joined her. Second thoughts? Hundreds. But we're committed now. If this works, you'll have saved the North. If it doesn't, we all die and no one will remember my name. He laughed, short, sharp. That's the gamble, isn't it? Glory or oblivion, no middle ground. Seems to be the northern way. They stood in companionable silence, watching darkness spread across the mountains. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow they'd learn if a southern bride with no military experience could beat an army with nothing but mathematics and audacity. Tomorrow the North would either survive or fall, and Lyra Kalis, who'd arrived as property in a political transaction, would either become a legend or a cautionary tale. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of snow and smoke. Tomorrow. Tomorrow came with the sound of war drums. Lyra woke before dawn to the distant thunder of thousands of feet marching in unison. She dressed quickly, hands steadier than she expected, and made her way to the eastern ramparts. The clan army spread across the valley like a dark tide. Even knowing they were coming, seeing the actual numbers made her breath catch. Thousands. Maybe 10,000. Banners from a dozen different clans, unified under the Wolf of Korvan's leadership. They'd brought siege towers, battering rams, scaling ladders. This wasn't a raid. This was conquest. Ronan stood at the wall's edge, already armored, already scanning the enemy positions. They're committing everything, no reserves visible. They think they don't need reserves, Lyra said. Holt promised them the gates would open. Speaking of which, Ronan gestured below. In the courtyard, Torsten's men were moving into position around Holt's conspirators. Quiet. Subtle. The traitors still thought they were winning. Sergeant Vane was adjusting his armor, talking with his men. Lieutenant Core was inspecting weapons. They looked confident, prepared. They had no idea they were already caught. "When do we move on them?" Lyra asked. "When the first clan warrior reaches the eastern pass. That's when they'll expect the signal to open the gates. That's when they'll be watching for it." Ronan's jaw was tight. "That's when we'll arrest them instead." Below, the drums grew louder. The clan army was advancing. Dax appeared, breathing hard from running. "Everyone's in position. Pass defenses are ready. Archers have full quivers. We're as prepared as we're going to be." "And our little deception?" Ronan asked. "Perfect. Holt's people reported we've got minimal forces at the pass, maximum at the southern wall. The clans are concentrating their main force exactly where we want them." Lyra allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Then let's hope mathematics beats muscle." The first wave hit the eastern pass at dawn. It was a narrow choke point, steep rock walls on both sides, barely wide enough for 10 men abreast. The clans funneled into it like water into a drain, shields up, weapons ready. They expected token resistance, a few defenders they could overwhelm quickly. Instead, they got hell. The northern forces had prepared the pass like a slaughterhouse. Archers on the high walls fired down into packed ranks where shields couldn't protect. Rock slides triggered by hidden ropes crushed dozens. Oil poured from above, then ignited. The screams echoed off stone walls. The clans tried to push through anyway, sheer numbers against prepared defense. Bodies piled up. The narrow space became a killing floor. "They're not breaking through," Dax reported, watching from the ramparts. "Your math is holding." "For now," Lyra said. "But they'll adapt. They'll pull back, regroup, try another approach." She was right. After losing hundreds in the pass, the Wolf of Corvon pulled his forces back. From the walls, Lyra could see his commanders arguing, gesturing at the fortress, reconsidering their strategy. Then one of them pointed toward the southern wall. "They're going to split their forces," Ronan said. "Hit us from two sides." "Let them," Lyra replied. "We're ready for that too." But something nagged at her. The Wolf was too experienced, too careful. He should be more cautious after the past disaster. Instead, he was committing to a two-front assault? Unless, "It's a feint," she said suddenly. "The southern assault is a distraction." From what? Lyra's mind raced through possibilities. The pass was blocked. The southern wall was defended. The western approach was too exposed. That left the Watergate, she breathed. "They're going to try the river entrance." Ronan's expression went dark. "That's suicide. The current is brutal, the gate is iron reinforced, but it's the one entrance we haven't heavily fortified because everyone thinks it's impassable." She grabbed his arm. "We need to redirect forces there, now." Based on a hunch? Based on the fact that the Wolf is too smart to waste men on obvious approaches. He's probing our defenses, looking for the gap. She pointed to the river that ran beneath the fortress's western side. "That's the gap." Ronan hesitated for one heartbeat. Then, "Dax, take 50 men to the Watergate. Full defensive positions. Move." Dax ran. 15 minutes later, clan fighters appeared at the river. Smaller force, specialized equipment, clearly trained for water assault. They never made it to the gate. Dax's men were waiting, and the river turned red. On the ramparts, Lyra sagged with relief. One gap closed. "How many more?" Ronan asked. "As many as he can find." The battle settled into brutal rhythm. The clans probed, the north defended. Hours passed. Bodies accumulated. The fortress held, but barely. Every defense was tested, every weakness exploited. And through it all, Holt's conspirators waited for their signal. Sergeant Vane kept glancing at the gates. Lieutenant Core positioned himself near the mechanisms. They were ready to betray, just waiting for the right moment. "It's time," Ronan said quietly, "before they realize the plan failed and try something desperate." He gave the signal. Torsten's men moved fast. Within 30 seconds, every conspirator was surrounded, weapons confiscated, hands bound. Vane fought back. "What are you doing? We're on the same side." "You sided with traitors," Torsten said flatly. "Now you'll die with them." Holt promised. Holt lied. To you, to the clans, to everyone. The gates aren't opening. Your coup failed. Torsten gestured to his men. Cells, all of them. The arrests caused chaos. Soldiers shouted, demanded explanations. The conspirators screamed about injustice, about Holt's promises, about survival. But they went to the cells. Outside, the Wolf of Corvon saw the fortress's internal commotion. He must have realized something had gone wrong because his assault intensified. Desperate now, furious. The battering ram hit the main gates with thunderous force. They're committed, Ronan said, watching the frenzy below. No retreat now. They'll break themselves against our walls or die trying. How long can we hold? Long as we need to. They're burning through men faster than we are. Mathematics, remember? But mathematics didn't account for desperation. The clans threw everything at the fortress, wave after wave, caring nothing for casualties. They'd planned for an easy victory, and now pride demanded they take what was promised. The Eastern Pass defenders ran out of arrows. The southern wall took a hit from a siege tower that nearly breached the ramparts. The Watergate defenders fought hand-to-hand against clan swimmers who'd made it past the current. Lyra watched it all from the command post, coordinating responses, redirecting forces, trying to be everywhere at once through pure information management. A messenger burst in. My lady, the Eastern Pass, they're bringing up another ram. Send the reserve unit from Sector 3. Collapse the false wall we prepared. It'll buy time. The southern breach? Boiling oil. We stockpiled extra for exactly this. Western scouts report, I know. Tell them to fall back to secondary positions. Don't get surrounded. It was chaos, controlled chaos, but still chaos. And through it all, Lyra kept thinking, we're winning. We're actually winning. Then everything changed. A runner came from the cells, white-faced with panic. Commander Holt, he's escaped. Lyra's heart stopped. How? Killed 2 guards, took their keys. He's loose in the fortress. Ronan's hand went to his sword. Find him. Every available man. No, Lyra interrupted. He's not running. He's going to finish what he started. The gates? The gates. She was already moving. He knows we betrayed him. Knows his plan failed. But if he opens the gates now in the middle of the battle, the clans still win. They ran. The gate mechanism was on the ground floor, operated by a complex system of chains and counterweights. 4 men usually worked it. Holt was there alone, already pulling levers. Stop! Ronan's voice echoed in the chamber. Holt turned, bloody sword in hand. Too late. I've released the locks. 30 seconds and the gates swing open. We'll close them again. Not before 1,000 clan fighters pour through. Holt's smile was terrible. You think you won? You won nothing. The North falls today, with or without my governorship. Ronan drew his blade. Then you'll die with it. Gladly. Better than watching you strangle it slowly with your pride. They fought. This wasn't like their first clash in the courtyard. This was brutal, desperate, final. 2 men who'd fought together for 20 years now, trying to kill each other while the gates slowly opened behind them. Lyra ran to the mechanism. Chains, gears, counterweights. It was a mechanical puzzle, and she had seconds to solve it. The secondary brake, someone shouted. Finn, appearing from the shadows. Pull the left chain, hard. She pulled. The gates shuddered, slowed, but didn't stop. Both chains! Finn grabbed the right side. Together, now! They pulled in unison. Muscles screaming, the gates stopped opening, but they were already ajar. A gap of maybe 5 feet, enough for men to slip through single file. Clan fighters appeared immediately, trying to force their way in. Dax materialized with his unit, forming a human wall. Close those gates! We're trying! Lyra's hands were slipping on the chain, rope burning her palms. Behind her, Ronan and Holt's fight crashed through the chamber, steel on steel, grunts of effort, the wet sound of blade meeting flesh. Lyra couldn't watch. All her focus was on the chain, the mechanism, keeping the gates from opening further. More northern soldiers arrived, reinforcing Dax's line. But clan fighters kept coming through the gap, and the confined space made numbers matter less than position. We can't hold this forever, Dax shouted, blocking a sword thrust. You don't have to. Torsten appeared with the reserve forces. We just need to hold until... A scream. Lyra risked a glance. Holt was on the ground, Ronan's sword through his chest. The North, Holt gasped, blood on his lips, deserves better than you. The North, Ronan said quietly, deserves people who don't sell it for promises. Holt died without another word. Ronan pulled his blade free and turned to the gate mechanism. Everyone on the chains! We close this now! 20 hands grabbed chains. Together, they hauled. The gates groaned, fighting them, but slowly, agonizingly slowly, they moved. The gap narrowed. Clan fighters tried to force through, but Dax's men pushed them back. 6 feet, 5, 4. A clan warrior got caught in the closing gates. His screams were brief. 3 feet, 2. Almost there! Lyra's entire body was shaking with effort. 1 foot. The gate slammed shut with a sound like thunder. Soldiers rushed to secure the locks, drop the reinforcement bars, ensure they'd stay closed. Outside, the clan army roared in frustration. Lyra collapsed against the wall, hands bleeding, lungs burning. Is it over? The gates are closed, Ronan said, but they're still out there. They'll retreat, she managed. They committed everything to getting inside. Without that, they can't sustain a siege, not with their casualties. She was right. Within an hour, the Wolf of Corvan sounded the retreat. The clan army pulled back, taking their wounded, leaving their dead. They'd lost thousands. The North had lost hundreds. Mathematics had won. As sunset painted this blood-stained snow orange and red, Ronan called an assembly in the main courtyard. Every soldier who could stand was there, every citizen who'd survived the day. We won, he told them. His voice was hoarse from shouting orders. Against impossible odds, against betrayal from within, we won. Scattered cheers. People were too exhausted for more. We won because we adapted, because we listened to new ideas, because someone had the courage to see patterns we'd been blind to. He turned to Lyra. Lady Kalis, approach. Lyra's legs barely supported her as she walked forward. Her dress was torn, her hands bandaged, her hair a disaster. She'd never felt less like a noble lady in her life. You came here as a political arrangement, Ronan said, a transaction, but you've proven yourself something far more valuable, a mind that saves lives, a strategist who turns certain defeat into victory. He drew his sword. For a wild moment, Lyra thought he might actually execute her after everything, some strange northern custom she didn't understand. Instead, he knelt. The entire courtyard gasped. I kneel, Ronan said loud enough for everyone to hear, not to tradition, not to politics, but to the person who forced me to be better than I was, who challenged me when I needed challenging, who saved the North when I was too proud to see how. He looked up at her, and his eyes held something she'd never seen there before, genuine respect. I offer you not a crown, he continued, but partnership, rule beside me. Not as decoration, not as property, but as equal. Your mind and my strength, your strategy and my execution. Together. The courtyard was silent, every eye on her. Lyra's voice shook when she spoke. I accept. Not because I want power, but because the North deserves better than one perspective, better than stubbornness disguised as strength. She held out her hand. Ronan took it and stood. Then, before the entire assembly, he kissed her, not as king to subject, but as partner to partner. The cheers started then, slowly at first, then building. Not everyone was happy. She could see faces in the crowd that still looked skeptical, hostile even. But they were cheering, because she'd earned it, because mathematics had beaten muscle, and strategy had beaten tradition, and a Southern bride with no military experience had saved them all. Later, much later, when the wounded were being tended and the dead counted and the repairs begun, Lyra stood again on the ramparts. Dax joined her, limping from a leg wound but grinning. You did it. We did it. Don't be modest. This was your plan, your strategy, your gamble, your execution, your trust, your willingness to follow someone with no credentials. Credentials are just someone else's opinion of you, Dax said. Results are yours. He looked out at the battlefield. You know they'll write songs about this. The Battle of the Frozen Gates, the Strategic Bride, the woman who saved the North. I'd rather they write accurate reports. Songs get details wrong. He laughed. That's the most you thing you've ever said. Ronan found them as the last light faded. The council wants to meet tomorrow, discuss permanent defensive restructuring. They'll fight me on everything, Lyra said. Probably, but they'll listen now, because you were right and they were wrong, and Northern pride means admitting that eventually. He stood beside her. It won't be easy. Half of them still think women belong nowhere near war rooms. Then I'll change their minds, one battle at a time. That's a long war. I'm patient. Kira appeared with food, actual hot food, the first real meal in days. The fortress is calling you the Valkyrie Queen, the southern witch who conquered the north. I didn't conquer anything, Lyra said. I just participated. You saved us, Kira said simply. That's all anyone cares about. They ate in silence, watching stars emerge over the mountains. The same stars that had watched this fortress for centuries. The same cold wind that had killed weaker kingdoms. But the North had survived. Again. Not through strength alone, not through tradition alone. Through adaptation, through intelligence, through a southern woman who'd refused to be furniture and a northern king who'd been willing to listen. Finn approached hesitantly. My lady, I should have helped sooner. You helped when it mattered, Lyra interrupted. That's what counts. I was afraid. Fear is normal. Cowardice is letting fear make your decisions. You didn't do that. He bowed awkwardly and left. Dax watched him go. You collecting followers now? I'm collecting people who think before they act. Seems useful. Dangerous too, thinking people ask questions. Good, let them ask. I've got answers. She smiled. Or I'll figure them out as I go. The fortress bells rang, not alarm this time, but the all clear. The battle was truly over. People emerged from shelters, families reunited. Merchants began assessing damage. Life, stubborn and persistent, reasserted itself. Ronan put his arm around Lyra's shoulders. It was a casual gesture, but it felt monumental. Public claiming, partnership. No regrets, he asked. About what? Leaving the South? Being sold into marriage? Nearly dying multiple times? All of it. Lyra thought about it, really thought about it. The fear, the isolation, the constant battles against men who thought she was worthless. The nights she'd cried alone, certain she'd fail. The moments she'd wanted to give up. No, she said finally. No regrets. Because here, in this frozen hell, I found out who I actually am. Not who my father wanted me to be, not who Southern society expected. Who I am. And who's that? Someone useful. Someone who saves lives instead of decorating rooms. She leaned into him. Someone who belongs. You do, Ronan said quietly. More than you know. Below them, the fortress continued its work. Soldiers removed bodies. Craftsmen began repairs. Healers tended wounded. The machinery of survival turning again. And in the command center, fresh maps were being drawn. New defensive strategies drafted. Lessons from the battle compiled into doctrine. The North was learning. 3 months later, when spring broke the winter's hold, ambassadors arrived from the eastern clans. Not for war, for negotiation. The defeat had taught them what victory couldn't. The North had changed, adapted, become something more dangerous than brute strength. Lyra sat at the negotiating table as Ronan's equal. No one questioned it anymore. She'd earned her chair with blood and mathematics. The talks were tense but productive. Trade agreements, border definitions, mutual non-aggression pacts. One clan elder looked at her with something like respect. You're the one who designed the past defense. I am. Clever, brutal, very northern for a southerner. I've had good teachers, she said, glancing at Ronan. The North is changing, the elder observed. Not just in leadership, in thinking. Things that don't change die, Lyra replied. We chose to change instead. The elder nodded slowly. May we all learn that lesson before it's too late. When the ambassadors left, Lyra walked through the fortress that had become home. Past the war room where she'd first challenged Holt. Past the cells where she'd been imprisoned. Past the gates that had nearly opened to doom. She stopped at the eastern ramparts, where it had all begun. Where she'd first seen the clan army and thought, we're going to die. Except they hadn't. Because mathematics beat muscle. Because intelligence beat tradition. because one woman had refused to kneel and one king had been smart enough to listen. Ronan found her there as sunset painted the mountains gold. Thinking? He asked. Remembering. The battle? Everything. The journey here. The wedding. The first council meeting. She smiled. Your face when I dismantled your war strategy. I wanted to strangle you. I know, I could tell. Now I can't imagine this place without you. Lyra turned to face him fully. The North was here for centuries before me. It'll be here centuries after. Different North, though. Better one, maybe. He took her hands. You changed everything. We changed everything. Don't deflect. This was you. Your mind. Your courage. Your refusal to accept the world as it was. She looked out at the mountains, the fortress, the valley where thousands had died and thousands more had lived because of choices she'd made. I was terrified every single day, she admitted. I still am, sometimes. Afraid I'll make the wrong call, get people killed, prove everyone who doubted me right. And yet you still make the calls. Because someone has to, and I have the information, the analysis, the strategy. She squeezed his hands. Fear doesn't disqualify you from leadership. It just means you understand the stakes. That's why you're good at this, Ronan said. You feel the weight of every decision. Some days it's crushing, some days, but you carry it anyway. They stood together as darkness fell, two people who'd started as strangers and become something neither had expected. Partners. Equals. People who made each other better instead of smaller. Below them, the fortress settled into evening routine. Fires lit in windows, guards changed shifts, life, ordinary and precious, continued. The North had survived. Not just the battle, but the change. The evolution from pure strength to balanced power. From one perspective to partnership. And in the years that followed, as Lyra and Ronan reshaped the kingdom together, that balance became legend. The warlord king and his strategic queen. The man who knew how to fight, and the woman who knew when. They didn't solve every problem. They made mistakes. They argued, fiercely, intelligently, constantly. But they listened. They adapted. They survived. And the North, harsh and unforgiving as ever, thrived under their combined leadership. Because in the end, survival wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest or the most traditional. It was about being willing to change, to learn, to admit when you were wrong and amplify when others were right. It was about partnership in the truest sense. And it was about a Southern bride who'd refused to be property and became a legend instead. Not through magic or divine intervention, but through mathematics, courage, and the simple, stubborn refusal to kneel when she knew she was right. The North remembered. And in remembering, it became something more than it had been, something better, something that lasted.